ambassadors, dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming here today. SIPRI is most honored to have this distinguished guest coming here to make a lecture. You know that the Foreign Minister, Dr. Sarid, is a well-known personality. He spent many, many years at the UN as a UN diplomat, very successfully so, and was called back to become a minister in 2013. And then soon after started the intense and very difficult negotiations between US and Iran, which really required courage and foresight and boldness from both parties. And you succeeded. And I read that for each sentence, there was an explanatory appendix of several pages. So we realized that this was really hard. And we know that domestic opinion in both countries are not always very happy, but we think that we have to continue to work on this and give our full support. And we think you did an outstanding job. We think it's excellent that you now come to the Nordic countries. I know that you are visiting several of the countries in the area. And we hope also that your visit will create opportunities for lots of Swedish investments and business deals with Iran. So we are very happy to hear, and we welcome you very, very warmly. Please, Minister, you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to come to SIPRI to engage with you about this particular issue and how we can, in fact, use the opportunity and the experience gained from the nuclear negotiations in resolving other problems in our region. Let me, first of all, thank the Institute as well as other prominent Swedes, two of whom are here with us, Hans Blix and Rolf Ekius, for the prominent role they played throughout the years in promoting a peaceful resolution to this very serious crisis. I wanted to see if we could develop a model to be able to move from one positive experience and use the lessons learned in this positive experience and apply it to more critical and probably even hotter issues that are affecting our region and the world today. In order to do that, I need to start with a bit of analytical framework in order to be able to speak from the same starting point and be basically on the same wavelength. And that is, we now live in a globalized environment. We say that without often thinking about the implications of what a global environment would entail. We would all accept the proposition that you cannot have a healthy, clean environment, although you've managed to do a good job in Stockholm. But at the end of the day, you'll suffer from the consequences of global warming and greenhouse emissions and what else that is related to that. Not because of what you do in your society, but because of what we do as a collectivity globally. You cannot erect a wall around your community and hope to be immune from the impact of warming, of global warming. The fact is that this year it was warmer than last year, warmer than the previous year. This decade was warmer than the previous decade. And this warming affected all of us, regardless of the amount of emission that each one of us produced. So it would be considered foolish if somebody thought that I could preserve my environment while others were destroying theirs. It would also be not as readily acceptable, but understandable for many, that the global markets would require consumers to be able to consume somebody's products. So you need some sort of global prosperity in order for any particular society to prosper. Particularly the Swedes should understand that. You gain most of your wealth through trade. So you need able customers. So little by little, the international community is understanding that we need a global climate of prosperity in order for individual countries to prosper. What we fail to recognize is that as our ecology is indivisible and our economy is indivisible, our security is indivisible. That is, we cannot claim to have security while others are insecure. We cannot gain this security at the expense of insecurity of others. And I believe if anybody had any doubt about this, we got a big surprise on September 11th, 2001. The most powerful country on the face of the earth from the standpoint of military spending and military might. In the United States, I shouldn't say that, in SIPRI you have all the numbers, but the United States alone spends more than the next 10 countries spend on military hardware and military equipment. And probably the United States has more military strength than all other countries combined. But it could not do the fundamental task of any sovereign state, let alone a superpower. Any sovereign state has the fundamental task of providing for the security of its own citizens. And I don't know how many of you visited New York after September 11th. I did. And I saw in the face of every single New Yorker with whom I had lived for many years, the fear about what to expect next. So the most powerful country on the face of the earth could not achieve security when a country like Afghanistan, not even considered a player on the global scene, produced the insecurity that threatened it. Wasn't a wake-up call for any of us. We continue the same zero-sum approach to international security. We continue to try to gain security at the expense of insecurity of others. But that's an exercise in futility. And I think as soon as we realize that, then we have taken the biggest step towards resolution of very difficult problems. And I think the nuclear case in Iran was one such problem. We believed that because Iran considered nuclear weapons as detrimental to its security, then we shouldn't care about other people's anxieties. We should just say, and that's what we said for a very long time, that we are sticking to NPT and IAEA safeguards so we can have our program. It's none of anybody's business. At the same time, the United States used to say that a single centrifuge for Iran would be a step towards a nuclear weapon. So a gain for the United States was a loss for us, and a gain for us was a loss for the United States. We thought that anything would sort of create a dent in our right, and they thought that anything would enable Iran to take one step towards nuclear weapons. we had defined the problem from the zero-sum perspective that unfortunately most of us seem to be engaged in, even when we call about nuclear deterrence. Because I think, and I shouldn't say this in this forum, everybody agrees with me, that trying to gain security through mutually assured destruction is pure madness, as it stands for, MAD. That doesn't give you security. To be secure just because you believe you can destroy the other side and many others many times over. That's a rather foolish sense of security we all have. But that is how we have defined zero-sum perspective. Let me give you two stories about the foolishness of a zero-sum perspective. Somebody was asked that whatever I will give you, I will give twice as much to your competitor. Looking at it from a zero-sum perspective, he said, destroy one of my eyes, because he'll get two. That story may seem foolish for you, but it is what we are engaged in on a daily basis. Nobody wins a war. It's just losing one eye rather than two eyes. Somebody loses a certain amount, the other side loses twice as much. We can change the story. The guy goes home, sees his sister making sweets, and he's thirsty. There's an orange sitting on the table. The sister has used all the water in order to make cake. So he takes the orange to quench his thirst. And the sister says, I need to use this orange, but he's more powerful. Takes the orange to the room. The sister starts crying. Mother comes in. Says, what you doing? He says, I want to have the orange. Mother says, but your sister wants it. The guy says, okay. I'm talking about zero-sum perspective. I'll cut it in half. She can have half, and I can have half. This is still a zero-sum perspective, but trying to gain, half and half at least. But then the mother says, no, you got to talk to your sister. And then he talks to the sister, and the sister says, I don't need the orange. I just need the peels. So I'll peel the orange for you. So he, instead of getting 100%, he gets 105% because somebody peels the orange for him. I take the peels and you take the orange. You see how our perspective in defining the same problem may affect us from losing one eye so that the other side gets two eyes, getting half an orange or getting the entire orange. The way we address the nuclear problem from Iran not getting getting a single centrifuge, to Iran having its nuclear program, was to redefine the problem. Because Iran had the technology, the United States had to come to the realization that it was impossible to deprive Iran of the technology. So it was prudent for all of us to redefine the issue as Iran continuing to have its nuclear program, which will always remain peaceful. So how this is presenting the problem in a way that it could be solved, rather than presenting the problem in a way that it would lead to deadlock. Now, question is, can we find it within ourselves to start looking at our problems in the region from a non-zero-sum perspective so that we can start resolving them? Do we need to define every issue in the region as my gain will be Saudi Arabia's loss. Is it necessary? Is it necessary to present problems in that fashion? Or is it possible for us to start redefining the problem? Problems in our region are very serious. The problems in our region affect all of us. It's the inability of our region to deal with the requirements of its own population. And the perverted response to that inability is the extremism and terrorism that is fed by hate propaganda and hate literature. Do we need that? Do we need the prolongation of the conflict in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Bahrain, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere in our region just to prove the other side is wrong? Just to try to gain at the expense of the exclusion of the other side. Can we start defining the problems in a way that they're amenable to a solution? Can we start looking at the common gains, common threats and challenges? Because we will always have differences. I mean, it's only natural to have differences. It's only natural to have issues where you will not see eye to eye. But should those issues lead to 5 years of bloodshed in Syria? Did we need excuses to continue the bloodshed? Because if you want to have excuses not to agree, you will always have excuses not to agree. And you will always have a huge segment of the population who will love your macho literature, who will love your macho pronouncements. It's appealing, unfortunately. Compromise is usually less appealing than trying to simply state a maximalist position. Can we redefine the problems in our region? Can we start finding common grounds? Can we articulate the question from a standpoint of positive sum games? Because I contend that we no longer have zero-sum games in our today's world. In a globalized world, a zero-sum approach to problem solving will produce negative-sum results. That is, everybody loses. Somebody loses less, some more. But is it a matter of pride for one country to afflict its population with 10,000 losses and be proud that the other side lost 100,000? Is this a matter of pride for anybody? Because that's the outcome. In conflicts, nobody wins. There are possibilities for us, and I can tell you, had we not done that in the nuclear case, and it takes a lot of courage to start looking at a problem that you were used to looking at it from one zero-sum perspective, to try to look at it from a positive-sum perspective. Then we have a lot of common opportunities in our region. We can start from the Persian Gulf. We all depend on the Persian Gulf. We all need a stable Persian Gulf. We are all dependent on the Persian Gulf, and there are a lot of us building nuclear reactors around the Persian Gulf. So we all need nuclear security and safety in the Persian Gulf. Then we can move further. There are other commonalities. Now you see the fight over the oil prices. Who's winning? You all remember how it started. I mean, some economics, but a lot of politics. And now who's suffering? There are unintended consequences here. stability in the oil markets. That's a common goal that not only Iran and Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region, but even the entire global economy could share. Even consumers could share that perspective. Then the most important issue for everybody, fighting extremism. Extremism is not a threat that can be contained in one country, one locality, just like other diseases that are contagious. In a globalized world, you have the outbreak of a communicable disease in Philippines. In 2 days, you have the same disease in Canada. You have something in Brazil. Tomorrow, you have the same disease in Europe and in Asia. Terrorism and extremism is a virus, is a disease in a globalized world. It can't be contained in one locality, in one region. The perception or misperception that some of our friends in the region had, that you can have the Syrians and the extremists kill each other off in the streets of Syria, boy, was it wrong. Because you'll never kill extremists through this method. Why is it that the extremists broadcast the burning of a soldier and then increase their recruits the next day? It shows that the approach that some people had to addressing this issue was wrong. It shows that you cannot breed hatred, promote hatred, and at the same time fight extremism. You need to find an understanding that all of us will lose together from extremism, that we cannot even make short-term gains, that we cannot use extremists as a leverage against somebody, and then try to redefine problems in order to solve them. Do we need to focus on one personality in order to resolve the situation in Syria? Has it produced any results? Because focusing on an individual is a zero-sum game. He's either there, 100% for him, not there, 100% for you. Nothing in between. And then we give ourselves the ethical comfort of somebody's hand being bloodied. But that's not an ethical comfort, because over the last 4 years, hundreds of thousands of people have lost their homes. That's not an ethical comfort. But we could have redefined the problem. Do we need to talk about an individual, or can we focus on institutions? Can we focus on procedures? Let me just give you a possible scenario. Now, the fight over the last at least 6-7 months since the International Syria Support Group, ISSG, has been created, is what is the role of one individual in the transition process. More or less everybody agrees that the transition process is a transition process, but would he stand for election after transition or not? But we are assuming that there is only one possible outcome. Let us assume that instead of a presidential system, the Syrians would decide to have a parliamentary system. Then would it be worth it to continue the fighting, continue the carnage, over an issue will be irrelevant in 2 years? Because we don't have a presidential system. I'm just assuming. That's not a decision for us to make. That's a decision for the Syrians to make. But we have prolonged the conflict. We have prolonged the crisis over how we have defined the issue. We can redefine the issue. It's difficult. Believe me, it was very risky when we started the nuclear negotiations. And some of us are still paying the price in Iran, and some are paying the price in the United States. but it is possible to think about alternative ways of defining problems. And then move forward. Take courageous steps. Believe in the fact that we're in the same ship. Our region is going through turmoil. Nobody will be immune from the threat of extremism. Today, the only people who are gaining, be it in Yemen, in Central Asia, in Afghanistan, in Syria, are the extremists. These are the only people who are gaining. And we need to wake up to the reality that trying to achieve security at the expense of insecurity of others, pride at the expense of pushing down the others, leads us all to losing probably everything. And once we start redefining that, I'm not saying that the answer to that particular issue is a parliamentary system, but I'm saying there are ways of defining the problem that are amenable to answers. There are ways of looking at things that would provide for cooperation rather than confrontation. There are ways of presenting the issues that will bring us closer together, would give us the understanding and the courage to appreciate the reality that in this current international environment, there cannot be winners and losers. We will either all win together or, God forbid, lose together. And I hope we all have the prudence to start winning together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for a very nice and reasonable plea for thought and win-win situations in the world. I have understood that you are prepared to take a few questions, and I would like to kick off. First of all, you talked about compromise, and we used to be masters of compromise here in Europe, and now all of a sudden we seem to have come to a complete deadlock. Europe is at a mess, actually, to tell the world what to do and not to do. And now I will ask you to tell Europe what to do or not to do. We have Brexit, we have authoritarianism, we have a mishandled refugee situation, we have the euro crisis. Please give Europe your best advice. My second question is, I go back to the situation where we Europeans tell the world what to do. As you know, we in Europe, and not least Sweden, are quite concerned about the situation for human rights in your region, the whole region actually, but also your own country, about death penalty that is used extensively, about whipping and other violations of human rights. Please tell us your views about that. Thank you very much.
I won't beat around the bushes and I'll answer the second question because I don't consider myself prepared to answer the first question. I'm not in the position of giving advice. I think we all need to recognize the fact that a lot has gone wrong. I always ask this question. We used to say rather conveniently that dictatorships produce wars and democracies produce peace. I tend to generally agree with that. But sometimes I ask this question, why is it that some of these criminals who are beheading innocent human beings in Syria and Iraq speak English and French with native accents? Were they the products of dictatorships in our region? or were they the products of so-called liberal democracies? What went wrong? Can we not engage in a serious dialogue about human rights? Human rights that produces extremists in our region? What produces extremists in your region? Can we, in fact, engage in a serious discussion? Now, I believe every country, as a teacher of human rights, I've been teaching human rights since 1988. So as somebody who agrees with universal values that are reflected in human rights, and we believe that some of these universal values emanated from our Islamic culture, which 1400 years ago called for equality, of accepting domination from another being. 1400 years ago, لا تكن عبد غيرك فقد جعلك الله حرا. Don't be the slave of anybody because God created you free. So this is the culture that comes from our part of the world. Can we engage in a serious discussion about how we can, in fact, manage our societies in order to produce less of this problem? Now, everybody can improve their human rights situation, but we need to address the human rights in their totality. I believe the worst enemy of human rights defenders and those who protect human rights is the political manipulation of human rights for gains. Let me give you one specific example. For 10 years, 8, President Saddam Hussein of Iraq instructed his delegation to vote in the United Nations in favor of resolutions condemning Iran for violations of human rights. Nothing against him because he was the sweetheart. He was using chemical weapons against us. Nobody cared. You go search UN books. I was there all the time. So I can challenge you to go and search every UN compendium of resolutions. Until August 1990, not a single negative reference to Iraqi violations of human rights. And in 1990, when a Dutch special representative was appointed to investigate human rights in Iraq, the next year he produced a report that Saddam Hussein is the worst violator of human rights. What happened all of a sudden? I mean, from somebody who the United Nations has said nothing about his human rights violations to somebody who became all of a sudden the worst violator of human rights. Of course, violations of territorial integrity of Kuwait and occupation of Kuwait was a crime. But that was not the reason he was a despot and violated the rights of his own people. Actually, the way he violated the rights of his own people brought him to do what he did against Kuwait. So I think the worst enemy of human rights is using human rights for political gains. I don't want to name names, but please go and see who voted in our region in favor of the resolution that Sweden presented to the Human Rights Council against Iran. And you'll be ashamed because you didn't produce a resolution against them. So how we go about this is to make human rights a subject that deals with actual human integrity, human respect. And then you see all of us can make gains. All of us can improve. In Iran, we have many deficiencies. Actually, it's good that the people of Iran can discuss these deficiencies and then can go to the ballot box. And in spite of whatever people say, produce an election outcome that was predicted to be otherwise by all the pundits. We have proven the pundits to be wrong again and again and again, and people continue to make the same predictions. That this guy, because he's the favorite of this group, will be the next president of Iran, will be the next parliament member of Iran. And each time they're proven wrong. I think we need to engage in a debate about what went wrong. What do we need to do here in our region? What is needed to be done in Europe? What are the impacts of alienation? I asked the question first, and I don't pretend to have the answer, but I have some indications that a person who views his values to be attacked with impunity, I reject anti-Semitism wholeheartedly, and I pay the price for it. But somebody who says anything against the Jewish people who are represented in the Iranian parliament and are a respected minority in Iran becomes an anti-Semite. Anybody who says anything about somebody from Africa becomes a racist. But anybody who says anything about Islam is exercising his freedom of expression. How can you answer to a Muslim living in our part of the world or in Europe that you are fair game? Be insulted, that your values can be insulted. And then you expect some demagogues to come, give them a perverted ideology that is financed by money from some of your allies, and expect them not to be interested. I think you got to look for answers in a dialogue. I'm ready to engage in a dialogue with Europe on human rights, but I have told Federica Mogherini that it will be a two-way dialogue. I won't like what some of the things that I'll hear, and you will certainly not like some of the things that you will hear, but we need to be serious and engage in that dialogue. But believe me, it will be a dialogue. It won't be a monologue.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think it's a pity that you wouldn't give us your best advice on European affairs.
Because I don't know about it. I mean, I learned some time ago to only speak on issues that I know about. You see?
That's a shame for a politician. That's not normal.
That's one of the reasons you get a PhD. You get a PhD to understand that you only know very little.
That's the normal definition of a diplomat, a person who knows very little about lots of things. Now I open up the floor. I start with Dr. Hans Blix, former Foreign Minister of Sweden, and who will lady behind you up there? Would you like to take several questions or one at a time?
Whatever you want.
I think we'll do 3 at a time. So.
Okay, so I take notes.
Would you like to have a glass of water?
Mr. Minister,
Swedish cheese.
I have a PhD, and I have learned that those who go further and become professors, they are the ones who know everything about nothing.
Exactly.
However, that was not my question. The question was rather that, a comment, that I think the nuclear deal and Security Council resolution with Iran has a tremendous success. And that view is shared by a great many people, most people, I think, in this country. The question I have is, with the experience that you've done in this and the tremendous contribution that you have made to it, together with your president and the president and Secretary of State of the US, and I think Russian Foreign Minister and others, is this something that could be replicated? That the lessons that you've learned, could that be used in the case of North Korea? North Korea is a very different case from Iran. I do not do the parallel at all. But the experience that you have of these long negotiations, could you see anything that you could have use of and get forward in that very, very dangerous situation? I have a second question, which is simpler for you. And that is, you have 2 nuclear reactors in Bushehr, and I visited them. And next year, there will be 1 operating reactor in Abu Dhabi, and I've seen it. And my question is really, could do not Iran take a step to have agreements and cooperation between the countries in the Gulf for nuclear safety. It's something that we have experienced between Sweden and Denmark in the past, and it's perfectly normal. Germany and France, for instance, have done it. Could you do something else? Such small steps, constructive steps, I think are useful, and I will certainly be in favor and happy if you have a positive reply.
Thank you, Hans. Yes.
Ambassador of Lebanon, welcome, Excellency, to Sweden. My question is very simple. A few years ago in Lebanon, we used to say, in order to resolve any political crisis, go to the equation SS, which is Syria, Saudi Arabia. Now this equation has changed. With all what's happening in the region and in Lebanon, the political crisis, we don't have a president since 2 years, everybody says you go to the equation SI, Saudi Arabia, Iran. Now, my question is here, what are the possibilities in order this equation to come to reality, to be true? Why it's not happening? Why this equation cannot be approachable these days? Thank you very much.
And the lady behind you there.
Thank you. I am the Chargé d'Affaires of the Syrian Embassy here in Stockholm. I would like to thank Your Excellency for this enlightening lecture. Unfortunately, it's very short. And I would like to reiterate what you have already mentioned, that it should be up to the Syrians to decide the future of their country, especially that we have proved through the last 5 years that we are institutional country. All ministries, they are still working, the government is still giving salaries to the employees. And unfortunately, there are certain countries who are still benefiting of the war in Syria. So what are your envision concerning this? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister, you have the floor.
Should I answer? Or
I think you will satisfy ourselves with 3, and then we'll
okay.
continue with another bunch.
Okay. Again, I don't know much about DPRK, but I believe if we looked at the real problem and try to answer the question of how you can, in fact, ensure regime security in DPRK, which is the source of the problem, rather than trying to deal with the consequences, I think that would be the answer to the question, and probably we can find solutions, because I believe nuclear weapons will not provide security for anybody. If it could provide security for anybody, then Soviet Union would not have disintegrated. So that's my short answer to that question, but I'm not the decision maker there. But I believe that you need to address the problem, and probably it's easier to find a solution to that problem rather than finding the solution to the consequences. But again, I'm not an expert. People who are experts in this haven't been able to resolve it, so who am I to try to resolve it? Agreement in the Persian Gulf on nuclear safety. Actually, I've written about this. I've suggested this in my article in the New York Times, that there are areas that we can cooperate. I suggested the establishment of a regional dialogue forum in the Persian Gulf, and I believe one of the first issues that we can, in fact, address without much controversy is how to ensure nuclear safety in the region. Because now, since everybody is jumping on board and getting nuclear, No, in the Persian Gulf, I mean. Everybody is building nuclear power plants, so nobody can say, shut down yours. Everybody has a piece of the pie, so we can all work together in order to make sure that the body of the water we all share and consider our lifeline to remain secure. So I'm all for it, and if CIPRI wants to start a project on this, I will certainly send a representative to participate with you. I think it's a very worthwhile project to maintain nuclear safety in the Persian Gulf area. I was trying to answer the question about Iran, Saudi Arabia. I believe Iran and Saudi Arabia should start to understand that they will have to live together in this region. And neither one can exclude the other. And neither one can benefit at the expense of the other. I think that's the case in Lebanon. Of course, it's for the Lebanese people, and we've never vetoed any decision by Lebanon. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same about others in the region. But I believe the real necessary prerequisite for going about addressing these issues, and that's what I try to belabor in my presentation, is to reach the understanding that, first of all, we cannot make short-term gains. Terrorism doesn't give anybody short-term leverage. And we cannot play with the domestic politics of other countries. We can, in fact, work together. And I truly believe that there is no reason. I usually say, if Iran and the United States, one calls the other the axis of evil and the other calls the other great Satan. If these two can reach accommodation on the nuclear issue, how can two countries, which cannot be separated because of facts of geography, and call each other brothers, cannot resolve issues? I think it's all in the paradigm. We need a paradigm shift. And I think we in Iran are ready. And that is why we have exercised a great deal of self-restraint against serious provocation. And I hope that our neighbors will come to the same understanding. On Syria, I believe at the end of the day, the only sustainable solution to Syria is a Syrian-owned and Syrian-led solution. That's the only sustainable solution. Now, people outside can facilitate a solution, not dictate a solution. We should certainly not even try to dictate preconditions for a solution. What has prevented us from engaging in really addressing the issue or helping to address the issue is that there are sets of preconditions that everybody has that prevents the Syrian people from even sitting together trying to resolve their issues. And I believe that is the hurdle that we have to cross. And I think the sooner we cross that hurdle, the less lives that will be lost in Syria.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have two people over there and then one over there. Please, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Excellency. Thank you very much, and really your speech was very interesting. But I received a part of my answer of my question, because really my question was that we know there is no doubt that the regional powers in the region, they have a very great impact and influence on the conflicts in the region. So my question, that's just only, I would like to see there is any kind of initiative loom in the future for find a kind of solution for these conflicts. So, thank you.
And Birgit, behind there.
Very much, Your Excellency. I would like to go back to Syria, if possible, for a while. Today, airdrops are starting to be fulfilled through a decision in the ISSG the other day. We know that there are several besieged areas in Syria where people are starving to death. So these airdrops are more than welcome, of course, of both medical care, but also of food. Is there any way that Your Excellency, would think of that your government could put pressure on the Syrian government to let the besieged areas be more easily accessible for the United Nations and the WHO, because they are the ones who give the food to the besieged areas? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Birgit.
Thank you. Carl Ritter from the Associated Press. I have two questions for you. The first one is the Republican frontrunner as you may be aware, in the United States, has said he will renegotiate the nuclear deal if he's elected. How concerned are you about that? Is this a deal that even can be renegotiated? The second question is, your counterpart in Saudi Arabia has urged Iran to not intervene in Iraq. I was wondering if you could describe the extent of Iran's involvement in the battle to retake the Iraqi city of Fallujah right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know when Iraq gave up its sovereignty to Saudi Arabia. That's an affront to another country's sovereignty when we cooperate with the government of Iraq. And they claim to recognize that government. And then they say Iran should not intervene in Iraq. That's an intervention in itself, that statement. It's an absurd statement. It's an arrogant statement. And the sooner he stops making these nonsense statements, the better we all are in order to reach an agreement. I mean, nobody should arrogate to themselves to talk on behalf of other countries. So we will leave Iraq whenever Iraq asks us to leave. And we will help Iraq to confront terrorism as long as Iraq wants us to help it to confront terrorism. And I believe everybody should come to the help of Iraq to confront terrorism. Nobody should see ISIS in Fallujah as their allies. Nobody should start being concerned about why ISIS is being defeated in Fallujah. The reason I'm saying that is in the back of many people's minds, they consider ISIS and Nusra to be leverages that can be used for political gains. And that's the worst miscalculation anybody has made in our region. Worst possible miscalculation. And I believe the sooner Saudi Arabia comes to understand that ISIS is first and foremost a threat against them than anybody else, the sooner we are able to confront this total menace for all of us, not only in the region, but in the world. Since I started from your question, let me continue with your question. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, or what you call the nuclear deal, is not an Iran-US agreement for the Republican frontrunner or anybody else to renegotiate. It's an international understanding annexed to a Security Council resolution. And of all people, the United States, which is a permanent member of the Security Council, should respect the institution of which it's a permanent member. And I think it's not a negotiating possibility to renegotiate a text that is annexed to the Security Council Resolution 2231. On humanitarian assistance to Syria, I think there are a number of very imminent humanitarian crises in Syria, both with regard to starvation as well as with regard to threats of mass murder and mass rape. And we are all duty-bound to work together in order to address these crises comprehensively. And Iran committed itself in the ISSG meeting to help in any way possible in order to address them comprehensively. But you cannot pick and choose. It's all people who are under threat of starvation, all people who are being threatened with mass rape and mass execution are human beings. We should be concerned about all of them, not about a specific group that have been the subject of the most propaganda. Of course, any single human being is valuable, and saving the lives of any single human being is important. But in this conflict, we need to have a comprehensive approach in order for us to be able to sustain that approach. Of course, we've been able to send one airdrop or two airdrops to one locality or the other, but since it's not comprehensive, it fails to be sustainable. So we need to have a comprehensive, sustainable strategy to provide humanitarian assistance to all besieged areas. And hopefully, we should move to extend cessation of hostilities to a ceasefire, comprehensive ceasefire, across Syria, enabling all of us to fight Daesh and al-Nusra. You know, in all ISSG meetings, I have called for two things: ceasefire and one simple sentence: there is no military solution to the crisis in Syria. I don't think that's a very difficult undertaking. But go read the documents. That sentence you cannot find in any of the documents. And go ask anybody who participated in those meetings who prevented the inclusion of that sentence in the document. It would be the same gentleman who asked us not to intervene in Iraq. Regional initiative. Regional initiative. I think regional initiative is absolutely necessary. I believe we should start with the dialogue. I believe we should begin to air the difficulties, the problems. Of course, we can get bogged down in our narratives of the past. That's one way. We all have narratives. Who should gain whose confidence? Sometimes this question is asked: how can you gain the confidence of your neighbors? And I usually answer, why should we gain their confidence? Did we help Saddam Hussein when he was bombing them, or did they help Saddam Hussein when he was bombing us? So who should gain whose confidence? So let's not get bogged down in old narratives, because everybody has plenty of blame to get around. What we should do is to present a future that we can share, because the past is past. And I can assure you that I can engage in any debate with my Saudi counterparts or anybody and see who's in debt of whom. But I don't want to do that, because I don't believe that's conducive. Had we engaged in a rehearsal of the past grievances on the nuclear issue would never have been resolved. We started looking at the future. And I believe in our region, we need to start to look to the future to see how best we can address the common challenges that exist today, rather than rewrite the history of what happened in the past 30, 40 years, or 100 years, or 1,400 years. Because some people are trying to rehash 1,400 years grievances, and that would only get us into a quagmire that would engulf everybody.
Thank you very much. I think we have a few more questions. We have Rolf here, we have the gentleman over there, and then we get that there, over there, yes.
Just a small remark. First of all, the Dutchman you mentioned was, of course, Max van der Stoel, a wonderful man. He's not living anymore. But I think we all should be really ashamed about the international attitude to the way Saddam Hussein operated with massive chemical warfare against Iran. However, I will just try to make a little exception. And that was when Iran took the initiative in the Conference on Disarmament to present powerful proof of the chemical, biological attacks on Halabja, and asked for a reaction, and it was silent all over the room. But I'm happy to say that one delegation, Sweden, was the only one, because Sweden is not a part of any military alliance. So we are acting on our own judgment, on our own moral responsibility. We joined with Iran on condemning that. But that was certainly not because I asked for the floor. I would like to say one thing to this community and first of all to her. I think your leadership, your colleagues in Iran, but also your personal leadership in negotiating this, one of the most complex deals in modern history and certainly in arms control, would really merit the Nobel Peace Prize. And I really hope that you will rightly be nominated for that.
Okay, over there, yes.
Thank you, Rob.
Ambassador for Armenia, thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for a very insightful lecture. I have two questions regarding to our region to the north of your country. Lately we have witnessed a new resumption of hostilities in the region, and it's apparent that on part of the international community, not everything is done to contain the possible resumption. I mean, and Iranian position was always very positive and very exemplary towards the sides of the conflict. I hope on that issue you, as a good neighbor, would have some advice to share with us. And second question is regarding there are some developments on the status of Caspian, negotiations on the status of Caspian. I would like to hear about the Iranian perspective on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have, yes, over here. We'll go here first, from the Foreign Policy Institute.
My name is Peter Hammargren. Your Excellency, you've been talking about human rights abuses in other countries, and I know that domestic affairs is not one of your assignments, but allow me to ask you about what's your own point of view of human rights abuses that we hear from in Iran, like whiplashes of young people just recently, or executions?
Again, let me start with the last question. I believe respect for human rights is a source of legitimacy for all governments. And we can never stop in respecting human rights. Always advances can be made. I believe Iran needs improvements in that area. Now, we may have a difference of view about capital punishment because the challenge is different. We do not seek to execute people. I'm certainly sure, I mean, I'm not in a position to even decide on that, but if our judiciary tries to find other ways. But consider the fact that Iran confiscates 85% of the opium that is confiscated globally every year. That we have lost close to 4,000 people fighting those who want to transit these drugs, not for Iran, but for Europe. And they have offered us the possibility for safe passage. We have resisted that. And a lot of people are sacrificing in that fight. Now, we have asked Europe to give us the equipment to prevent them from bringing them, but they say no. These are dual-use equipment and you're under sanctions. We can't give it to you. Should we allow them to bring the drugs to your kids? How do we deal with that? We need to deal with that in a fashion to prevent drug trafficking. And I'm the last person to promote capital punishment in order to deal with that. But in the absence of alternatives, what other deterrents can be put in place? There is a healthy debate going on in Iran among our judicial community, among our law enforcement community, and among our counter-narcotics community, how to deal with these issues. And if there are excesses elsewhere, the policy of the government, which is independent, I mean the judiciary is independent from the government, is to pursue the rights of the citizens, and the president wants to promote a charter on citizens' rights, which will be out hopefully within the next few months before the end of this term of the president. So this is our way of looking at it. But I think once you start talking about human rights abuses in Iran, think about other issues. Think about the fact that Iran is probably one, if not the only, one or two countries in the region who even has elections. Huh? One of the two whose government changes through the ballot box. People have the option to go and change, make real change through the ballot box. Elect their parliamentarians through the ballot box. And it seems to me that we get than those who behead individuals, whose population never heard of ballot boxes. I mean, so get real, please, for the sake of human rights. Human rights are too important to be abused for political gains. Too important. Thank you, Ralph, for reminding us of chemical weapons. By the way, you know that not a single Security Council resolution named Iraq for using chemical weapons until after Iran-Iraq war ended. Can you believe that? From 1985, the Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar, whom I respect and admire greatly, produced report after report that Iraq was using indiscriminately chemical weapons against civilians and soldiers. The best the Security Council could do was to deplore the use of chemical weapons, that is in 1988, against Iranians, as if these chemical weapons came from the heavens. It refrained from naming Saddam Hussein until 1988. And the first time Saddam Hussein was condemned for the use of chemical weapons was when he used it against his own people in Halabja at the end of the war. And even then, the CIA tried to blame it on us. There is a whole article in the New York Times. I mean, had it not been for his invasion of Kuwait, some of the facts about the use of chemical weapons might have remained top secret even today. And now it becomes rather ridiculous that people who condoned and helped the use of chemical weapons by Iraq against his own people, against our soldiers, our civilians, all of a sudden draw red lines with regard to chemical weapons. Consistency is the source of credibility in international relations. And if you're inconsistent, you're not credible. On Nagorno-Karabakh, we've always insisted on a peaceful solution to this based on international law. We continue to use our good offices, to make our good offices available to our neighbors and friends in Azerbaijan and in Armenia to, if they want to use Iran as a vehicle for reaching a solution, because I believe it's an issue that needs to be resolved in our region and ended. The Caspian is a very complicated, is a body of water that is not replicated anywhere else. So we do not have a clear legal formula for Caspian. Of course, there are two treaties, 1921 and 1940, which deal with the Caspian, but these are Iran-Soviet treaties. And now the issue of succession, how it will affect the rest of the CIS countries that are bordering Caspian. It's a complicated issue, and it is being discussed. We have reached some understanding on Caspian environment, on protecting the fisheries, on other issues, but on the mineral resources of the Caspian, unfortunately, there is still work to be done.
Thank you very much. Can we take another question, or you think it's maybe?
But when we take another question, he knows my schedule.
Because we had one over there. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jawad Zarif. I am Tariq Zamir, Ambassador of Pakistan. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
My question is, where do you see Iran in 10 years' time, both domestically and internationally, given the facts that doors are being opened for you all over the world, as we see after the signing of the agreement? Thank you.
I see Iran, hopefully, I don't have a crystal ball, but I see Iran, hopefully, as a prominent regional player, promoting peace and stability in the region with the help of its friends and neighbors in the region, not alone, because we believe that it's a joint exercise, not an exercise that anybody can do alone, with Pakistan, with Saudi Arabia, with other countries in the region. We believe that all of us need to work together in order to have a secure environment. I believe, you see, we are proud of one fact, and that is our security and our prosperity is first and foremost home-driven. We are looking for investment. We are looking for cooperation. We are looking to attract businesses. I have 70 heads of business, private sector companies with me here in Sweden. They were with me in Finland and before that in Poland. And they're very successful in negotiating contracts with their partners. But our security and our prosperity are home-driven. We rely on our own people when required for their resistance, when required for their prudence, when required for their perseverance, when required for their innovation and scientific advances in order to bring the country forward. We cannot close our eyes to the world because, as I said, we live in a globalized world. But our reliance is on our own people. That's why we are the only country enjoying security in an unsecure environment, because we don't believe we can purchase security. We believe that we need to develop our own security, but we need a secure neighborhood too. So we are hoping to work with our friends in the region in order to bring about regional security as well.
Minister, thank you so much. You have been most patient. You had a wonderful lecture, first of all, and then you have taken all these questions. I realize that you're not only a very successful politician and an eloquent diplomat, you're also really a good university professor. And I remember...
Is that good or bad?
That's very good. It's very good. I read in your papers that there was one of your professors who said that you were probably his best student ever. Tom Rowe, I think his name was.
He wrote it. I didn't write
it. Yeah, he wrote it. And I think I agree. Thank you so much. And I know that you had very interesting meetings here. You have met with the Prime Minister and a number of the ministers, and now you're here. And then you will have a good dinner tonight.
I'll meet with the Iranian community here. I met the 3 ministers, the Prime Minister, a few others. Nice.
As it should be.
Thank you for your hospitality.
Thank you so much.